GLPs are a major talking point today, and retailers are working feverishly to figure out the types of products consumers taking the medication will need to help them live a healthier life. And while we are seeing new products hit shelves seemingly daily to address the dietary needs of those taking GLP 1s, there are still many questions to answer. Welcome to Store Brands Spotlight. I'm Greg Sleater, Executive Editor of Store Brands. Joining us today to talk about GLP 1s and their impact is Leigh O'Donnell, Head of Shopper and Category Insights at Kantar. Leigh will discuss research Kantar has completed about GLP 1s and talk about the potential long term impacts of this so called wonder drug and its impact that it may have on the retail marketplace. Leigh, welcome to the podcast.
Well, hi, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you, and it's great to talk about this topic that seemingly evolves and changes on a daily basis as the medical profession finds new uses and new ways that this drug is helping people that goes just beyond those with diabetes and weight loss. So it's a fascinating discussion, and when you hear some of the impacts that it could have, not just on retailers, but even the airline industry, when they start to talk about fuel
Yes,
usage,
that's right.
you realize there is really something happening here. So it's great to have you. Lee, to start with, Cantor and its research has revealed kind of four distinct segments among GLP users. Can you walk us through, these segments, who they are, and how maybe their goals and motivations differ?
I can. Happy to. And I guess before I lay them out, I think the thought that is worth framing around the four of them is to say that our clients, most branded manufacturers, retailers, and so on, really want to understand how great could this be for us, or how risky could this be for our brands and our products. And so while we had previously in our first four waves gotten a good understanding of, in general, what were about 2,000 folks per quarter saying, the the personas give us the ability to understand a couple of things. One is, how much agency do they have personally? Meaning, how much are they really in the front seat versus in the back seat of their own health? How do they describe their own health? How do they describe their eating? And so on. So those four types that you'd asked about, we call the first one leaning in. Leaning in is really our primary health driver. It's a weight loss persona, and that person is the kind of person who would say, I'm making choices that are smart about food, about exercise every day. There's another weight loss persona. We call that one lighten up. And lighten up is really more about, hey, you know what? I'm on this GLP-1 and I just want to take it, lose the weight, and move on with my life, right? They're not against healthier eating. They're not against health programming. They're just not real receptive to it, right? And then we have two diabetic centric personas. The first one is called Beat the Odds. Beat the Odds, like the first one I described, Beat the Odds is very interested in reversing diabetes and managing other health concerns that they've got. They're the ones who are the most likely to say, I'm going to do everything that it takes in order to manage my health long term. The fourth persona is called cruise control. And as you might guess from the name, it's really about, look, I'm good, right? These are the ones who tend to be the oldest, lowest income. And they're saying, like, my doctor understands what's good for me, and I'm going to follow their orders. So again, not against health, still restricting carbs like a classic sort of diabetic, but less about really trying to go forward into healthy lifestyles and choices, possibly less amenable to some of the newer options coming their way.
So you've got under the umbrella of GLP-1 users these very different approaches or different thought process among the consumers. Um, what does this say about the complexity of marketing to these populations? About what products do you develop for each of the populations?
I mean, that's the question that we're working with our clients on just about every day, right? So for many clients who've gotten an early start, they've got their finger in the air on which way the wind is blowing. They've got an understanding of how much impact. I think the next question to ask is, to what extent is any of our better for you programs going to be a close fit, a loose fit, or not a fit at all for this GLP-1 user? I think the majority of us have read, seen, or heard and verified in the data to a much greater extent. Um, Protein is important. Hydration is important. Fiber is important. And those are things that are also important to many of our clients in terms of what they are creating and making now. Um, but there is some divergence as well, some special needs.
Lee, did these insights at all challenge or change an assumption that those who take GLP-1s are more focused or more health conscious and more proactive about nutrition? You mentioned the folks on cruise control. Um, did it break some of that thought process, or was that thought process maybe never there?
It's amazing the amount of POV that clients and outsiders sort of bring to the table. Um, we wrote the first version of the survey, which we've stayed fairly true to. We wrote the first version of the survey having just heard Tracy Morgan say on the Today Show, I lost 40 pounds on Ozempic and I did it by eating half the bag of Doritos. Right. So, um, right. And by the way, he's gained the weight back. So, um, what that meant in terms of how we used the research and the survey instrument to pick apart different users' choices has really served us and served our partners really well. The stat that I think is worth walking around with is we asked people, tell us which of the following things describes your eating behavior. And the thing that is number one and has always been the top choice through all of our waves of fielding is I make mostly better choices in my food and drink. Right. So that gives you optimism, like, okay, that's going to be great. However, in all of the times that we've asked that question, never have more than 50% of people agreed with that statement. So to me, that is incredibly telling, because of course it's a survey, so people can, for the most part, paint themselves optimistically, if you will. But even within that, there really are not a lot of people, or a majority of people, I guess I should say, saying, I'm really choosing better. Now, the other choices in that question are not terrible choices, right? They say things like, I'm eating less, I have less interest in the same things, right? My tastes have changed, right? Sort of that more classic GLP-1, like, just less hungry kind of answers. But as we're asking ourselves for innovation purposes, for claims purposes, is healthy really the top thing? Healthy is the top thing, but it's not the runaway choice.
And I'm assuming in that, your definition of healthy and my definition of healthy may differ a little bit too.
Yes, but when you go back to those 4 personas and you slice and dice it 6 ways to Sunday, which is what we do all day, every day, and we look at, okay, so tell us specifically, plant-based protein. Are you eating more, less, or the same of these specific things? And how does that map against what your healthcare provider told you to do or not do, right? There are some extremely clear patterns that show how those two proactive personas, leaning in and beat the odds, how they are really validating what they say they are in all of the possible places. It's helpful
Right.
to know.
That's interesting.
Mm.
So we got different levels of motivation and how consumers engage with their health. Is there a specific way that retailers should be thinking about tailoring any new product innovation or communication strategies to the GLP-1 user?
There's a lot of ways to do it right, and there probably aren't very many ways to do it wrong. But let me lay out some of the things that I think that we know about retail. First of all, this is this work that we do, this is an attitudes and usage study, right? So these are consumers. However, because I've got 30 years of working in shopper insights, I knew that we had to get a plan together that you could take to Walmart, that you could take to Amazon, that you could take to Kroger. And so that's baked in here. The most shocking, if you will, headline from the whole study is that about half of shoppers say they have a new go to retailer for groceries and household essentials. And if you know a little bit about shopper insights, is that people are creatures of habit, right? You don't see a ton of switchiness, right? Financial pressures, tend to put people into one channel or another. So the idea that a half of folks claim that they're going to see somebody new really blew us away. And when you start to unpack why that is, what you see is a couple of things. One is they want a wider variety, right, of quality groceries. And then additionally, what they really want is help with their new lifestyle. And in some cases, that means education, programming, um, loyalty rewards for making the right kinds of shopping and purchasing choices, right? And the reality is, uh, above and beyond a lot of other things, GLP-1 makes people very slow think at the grocery store, right? Or where they buy their groceries. And, that I think is an opportunity for retailers and for brands to try to stand out because they're being rethought about.
So that's interesting. So there's half of the people you've polled who use GLP-1s are shifting where they shop. Um, where are they going? Are they going to either health food stores or smaller retailers that have more hands-on employees who can explain certain things to them? What's the change that they're making?
It's a nationwide survey, so there's a lot of zhuzhing around, if you will. Some themes from among it. Yes, there are definitely on the list of top 10 switched to. There's definitely some of the characters that you would think that you would see, right? The Whole Foods. There's more than a little bit of regional grocery, right? Your HEBs, your Publixes, and that I think has to do with perceptions of local and fresh, but also because you see quite often quality programming, personalized programming. But you also see some of the big guys on this list, your Walmarts, your Targets, your Amazons. And I think that is driven by breadth, right? Because for better or for worse, Walmart has a lot of sugar free choices, a lot of different and better for you choices. And they've developed that specifically over the years as their population has aged and moved further into diabetes.
So that's interesting. So it sounds like there's opportunity for retailers to either use specific types of phrasing or words, or maybe even educating their workers and their in-store employees about products that will help a GLP-1 user, whether it's more fiber or more protein. So it seems like there's really an opportunity to tap into something here.
I think that there really is. I mean, the places where we've seen GLP-1 sections in the store have been very small presentations. GNC, the Vitamin Shop, right, have GLP-1 sections. But what they also have is a pretty small footprint and a pretty high labor profile. So you can expect when you go there that someone's going to stand there and kind of walk you through your options. Meanwhile, you're never going to get that at a traditional grocery, at a traditional big box kind of a store, right? So what we know from our overall shopper insights work is the shelf itself is going to have to work harder. The retailer itself is going to have to work harder. I'll tell you, I just literally yesterday was at an event in Washington D.C. And we got a briefing that Kroger has been working on a new thing inside their app that literally every single one of their 100% of what they're selling through the app can be. I guess there's a new algorithm that rates how good it is for you on a scale of 1 to 100.
Hmm.
And I mean, it's taken them a long time to get the data to this level of completeness. So they're really just now starting to talk about it. But I took a look at it for a couple of the different products that I regularly buy, and I thought, this is something that people could really use, right? It could really, frankly, save you a lot of time, a lot of comparison to have this kind of universal algorithm. Never seen it before. Really fascinating.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, and I guess
Mhm.
when trying to build a shopping list, and you stand in a store and either now you could use a QR code, or try to read the ingredients on a box. And if you're somebody like me in your mid 50s, who the type keeps getting smaller and smaller, that's an easier way to build that shopping list before you even head out to the store. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that's right. And I think a lot of people, both on GLP-1s and, you know, living out in the world not on GLP-1s, care a lot about things that we didn't before, right? Micro and macronutrition, right? Paying attention to specific grams of protein inside their things. And you're right, the real estate on any given, package on the shelf is limited, right? You can only do so much on the front, on the back, et cetera. It's almost like the PDP, the product detail page of the website has like got to be your and also section so that people can learn about what it is that you do.
Yeah. Plus, I think the consumer overall, kind of post the pandemic, there's a larger number of consumers who are more engaged about what they're eating, and if a claim says it's good for you, they're just not buying that claim. They want to know why it's good for me, and doing more research. So yeah, I think there's all those changes, and yes, listen, the population's getting older too, so they want to know more. That's interesting.
That's right.
We Lee, you outlined some of the different groups within the GLP-1 under that umbrella. You mentioned a couple that are very proactive. Um, to reach those consumers, are there specific types of claims or attributes that the retailer should be highlighting to them to appeal to those shoppers?
That's a good question. And I think the first thing that you want to know about the more proactive persona types is that they say that they pay attention in more places. So before we get to the specifics of the claim, it's important to mention that the where and when, right? They've just got their feelers up, generally speaking. In terms of specific claims, I guess the one caveat I would say is that diets really do vary, right? When we, give them the laundry list of keto to Mediterranean diet, it's all over the board, right? I think the specific things that tend to be universal are the what's inside kinds of things: protein, fiber, hydration, all three of those really critically important. There's also with GLP-1 a risk of malnutrition, right? So you really need to pick some things that are nutrient dense in order to ensure that you're not eating empty calories and basically leaving yourself short at the end of the day.
And then for the less active consumer group, is there still value when trying to market to them? And is there certain things? Is it more education? Is it just highlighting things that maybe will encourage them to maybe be a little more active in choosing what they eat when they're on GLP-1?
Well, it seems like you and I are probably around the same age, right? So I think it's nice to see retailers, brands, and products trying to sort of come forward with products that fit with the lifestyle that I've got. GLP-1 users, whether they are actively pursuing their own health or just eating to have sort of a regular day, it's um, it's the right choice for manufacturers to create things that speak to the claims that folks need. And with an aging population, those same couple of protein and fiber ideas, that's what helps. And there isn't anybody who doesn't need to hear the basics of how to eat a correct plate.
So I think probably the question ultimately that retailers are asking and product suppliers are asking, when it comes to the conversation around GLP-1s, is the specific food or beverage categories, which ones maybe hold the greatest opportunity for growth when you tie that into the needs of the GLP-1 consumers?
I mean, this is a great question, and I guess I'm starting with these platitudes first. I don't think that there are any categories that that aren't consumed by GLP-1 users. We've seen what's been out in the press from Numerator, Circana, inside our study, and so on. And there are certain themes in the categories that sort of float to the top in terms of what people are eating more of and restricting. I think even a one of my favorite examples is Snickers High Protein, right? The candy manufacturers have every right to try to create a product that that either satisfies those nutritional needs, and or gives you right just that one small indulgence, even right. In the small is big, where there's take me away kind of a thing, right? I think it's fair game, um, to market to GLP-1 users, because honestly, their needs are unique and yet at the same time sort of universal.
Within all the research that Kantar has done, is has there been any identification of as more people use GLP ones, how this is going to influence long term shifts in consumer behavior? And is there any way for retailers and marketers to try to prepare for that now, or is it something they just have to keep watching?
Well, I would not sleep on what is going on with this medication, right? As we've talked about, um, the usages for which this drug is now and soon to be approved for go beyond diabetes and beyond obesity into chronic kidney disease, sleep apnea, and heart healthiness, cancer reduction. Right? These are things that are taking GLP-1's usage into a whole new arena. Millions and millions, and in some cases hundreds of millions of people, who have not been eligible for the drug may now be eligible, or again, as things continue to unpack and there's approval for it. When that happens, um, everybody's going to be a little less hungry, and it's time to prepare for that now in terms of how to get in the cart.
And Lee, if there's a piece of advice that you could give to retailers who are maybe trying to future proof a strategy around the GLP 1 consumer, what would that advice be?
I think the advice is, step forward, not away, right? The Our users tell us they have needs. They want education. They want to be in dialogue with their retailer and, frankly, with their brands in order to make new choices that support their lifestyle. They want products that have kind of a just for me feeling, whether it's explicit on the package or implicit to support specific macronutrients. If you're not coming forward into that kind of person as they start with their lifestyle, they may slide right back into the old retailer or the old brands when they come off of the drug. So if you're really committed to helping build that new lifestyle with them, you do that as a partnership, not as a maybe it'll happen. And I think part of why that's worth saying out loud is that there are still quite a few companies that I would say are, in the headwinds category, we politely call them, and they're still a little, we're just going to wait this one out. I don't think that's the right choice.